Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am very happy today to be joined by Mayor Don Darling, the mayor of St. John, New Brunswick, one of the most dynamic mayors in the country. You've been at it for, what, a year and a half now?
Year and a half.
And Mayor Darling and I had the opportunity to sit down this week and talk about many things, but one of them was the importance of supporting Canada's energy infrastructure, and in particular, our support of the Energy East pipeline. It's no surprise to anyone in this room that the City of Calgary strongly believes that it is absolutely essential that Canadian energy is able to reach markets. We also believe that Energy East is critical to Canada's prosperity. We know that pipelines are the safest way to move oil. And we know that companies making multi-billion-dollar investments in energy infrastructure require regulatory certainty. This is something I've talked a lot about over the last many months and years. But this is very clear. We need tough regulation, we need stringent regulation, but we also need regulation that makes decisions, that doesn't leave projects in limbo, that ensures that everyone is playing on a level playing field and the rules don't change mid-game. The Energy East project is a huge private investment, $15.7 billion. It will employ thousands of Canadians, it'll improve our energy security as Canadians, it will make our country more prosperous and more competitive. There are many, many economic and social benefits to this nation-building project. I'm sure Mayor Darling will talk more about all of those. And as I've said many times, our strategy on energy access needs to be all of the above. We need access to the Gulf Coast, we need access to the West Coast, we need access to markets in Eastern Canada, as well as access to the East Coast. So with that, let me turn it over to Mayor Darling, who represents the city that will be at the other end of the Energy East pipeline, to give you a bit of his perspective as well.
Thank you. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There'll be some consistency in the remarks between myself and Mayor Nenshi. Pleased to be here in the city of Calgary and to have this opportunity to meet with Mayor Nenshi today and earlier in the week to discuss our continued commitment to the Energy East pipeline application before the National Energy Board. The City of St. John has actively worked with TransCanada for more than 3 years on project design, land use planning, environmental, economic, and public safety matters. We have been very pleased with the progress achieved to date. We are all about due process and ensuring the safety of residents and the environment, and are confident with TransCanada's due diligence and planning. The cities of St. John and Calgary are, however, very concerned by the uncertainty created by recent events. Notably, TransCanada's recent request for a 30-day suspension in the NEB process, caused by the NEB's announcement that it was revising the scope of its hearing to include the consideration of upstream and downstream greenhouse gases indirectly related to the project. 3 years into the process, and the rules are changing. The project applicant and key stakeholders across Canada do not have clarity regarding the regulatory review. This is concerning and unacceptable. We are hopeful that the suspension will provide an opportunity for the NEB and government to show strong leadership and provide a higher level of detail and clarity regarding the regulatory process, and secondly, allow the government's interim measures for the Energy East review to proceed with efficiency and in a timely way without undue duplication. All Canadians can benefit from the Energy East pipeline. This is more than an opportunity for our cities. It is prosperity for our country. If done right, this could be a tremendous opportunity to safely transport Canadian oil resources to where they are needed in Eastern Canada and around the globe. By doing this, we can reduce our dependency on foreign crude oil imports and provide more Canadians with homegrown, reliable energy supply to power their homes and communities. It has been estimated that Energy East will support thousands of full-time jobs across this country during the development and construction stages for the project. For St. John and the province of New Brunswick, in particular, it could generate more than 3,500 full-time and spin-off jobs. Getting the NEB regulatory process restarted is the right thing for Canadians. We believe that the Energy East regulatory review has the capacity to resume and remain the transparent, evidence-based, and respectful regulatory process it has been until recently. This requires the expression of strong leadership by the Government of Canada, the NEB Acting Chair, and the NEB Energy East panel. Thank you. I had a couple of local questions, so if I could just deal with those quickly, and then we'll open up for questions. So from our local media back in St. John, New Brunswick, thank you very much for the questions. Question number one. A number of experts have told us Energy East is dead. Why don't you heed this advice and move on? So thank you for the question. The project has impact in St. John, in Alberta, and across the country, and until TransCanada withdraws its application, I, for one, and I'm sure Mayor Nenshi, are going to continue to advocate for Energy East. And, you know, for the NEB hearing process simply to start again, for the process to start. We've been very consistent in St. John, New Brunswick, that what we've been asking for the last number of months is to start and get the NEB process back up and running. Number two, should you be meeting with mayors who oppose the pipeline rather than with each other? You don't have to convince yourselves of the merits of the pipeline. It's communities in Ontario and Quebec who are trying to block the project.
Ah, your local press are mean.
Press. Well, again, hello to St. John. So look, folks, let me be clear. This is what vacation looks like for me. I'm in Calgary for a family wedding. I asked, and Mayor Nenshi graciously granted a meeting earlier in the week. We had great discussions, and we agreed that this was a great opportunity while here to talk about Energy East. I will absolutely meet mayors in Quebec and Ontario and anywhere else across the country that want to sit down and talk about Energy East. Question three, who do you blame for TransCanada's decision to withdraw its application? So for clarity, TransCanada has not withdrawn its application. It's simply suspended for 30 days. What should ordinary citizens do if they want to support the pipeline or they want the pipeline to proceed? Thank you, great question. Citizens and pipeline stakeholders should share their concerns with their MP and the Government of Canada. They can also make their voices heard in the regulatory process for this project. Be informed and engaged. Last question, I believe, is why are you not persuaded by the environmental arguments that the pipeline will increase global warming or pose a risk with spills? So with respect to the Energy East pipeline, St. John, again, has been working on this project for more than 3 years. We formed an NEB working group with stakeholders, and we have broken down our work into 5 categories: economic development opportunities, social impacts, environmental impacts, land use planning issues, and public safety considerations. We have and will continue to gather information in an effort to arrive at a fact-based conclusion with respect to this project. So those are our local questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take questions on Energy East, then I will speak briefly on the arena, and since this is my only media availability today, I will take questions on other topics briefly as well. So first, Energy East.
Do you think that this process or this project is being unfairly singled out for GHG requirements and there are other industries?
Well, look, you know, I'm new to politics. I'm you know, I'm first-time mayor. I'm not an expert on whether it's unfairly. You know, my understanding at a high level is this is not the same requirement that other pipelines have had to be exposed to. So you know, if there's other pipelines, you know, certainly there's been lots of conversation about a level playing field and fairness in terms of the process. And I think I'll go back to the comment that I made. You know, where we sit here is that the applicant is you know, through the journey has expensed a tremendous amount of investment in this process, and where we sit today is it's unclear how we move forward. So I think go back to the comment I made during my remarks, we're really calling on the NEB to bring clarity to this process so we can move forward again.
Yeah, it's very, very clear that, to my knowledge, this is the only pipeline that has ever been asked to account for upstream GHG emissions of the product it's moving, which is madness, because there are environmental regulations on the upstream as well. This pipeline will displace 1,500 oil-by-rail cars, trade cars. It's not that if you don't have this pipeline built, the stuff's going to stay in the ground. It's that it will be transported by rail, and it also means that the refineries in New Brunswick and in Quebec will continue to use foreign feedstock. I think many Canadians east of the Ontario-Quebec border don't realize that when they go to fill up their car with gas, that is not actually Canadian oil. It is oil that has been delivered to refineries either by pipeline under the St. Lawrence River, under the St. Lawrence Seaway, or by freighter up the St. Lawrence from places like Algeria, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia. And so to look at only the upstream impacts of Alberta's oil sands on whether or not to build a pipeline it has no scientific basis. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's a change that the NEB should not have made.
So Mayor Darling, you mentioned before that you're more than willing to sit down with Ontario and Quebec leadership who want to talk. How do you get in the room with those who don't want to talk? And Mayor Nenshi, you can take a swing at this as well.
Yeah. So look, I'm a pretty tenacious guy. To date, look, we haven't done that. I mean, I think it was a great question from our local media, and absolutely willing to play a larger role here. I think I'd take it in steps. First and foremost, we need the NEB process to get moving again, and secondly, if I can play a role, I mean, I've been communicating with our Premier, Brian Gallant, I've been communicating with the province of New Brunswick Minister of Energy, Rick Doucette, and so alignment in terms of how the Mayor of St. John, New Brunswick can play a role in helping in some fashion move this process forward again. So I think it's two steps, the NEB process getting rolling, and then certainly I'll certainly play a role with those mayors.
And I want to remind us that much as we love talking about these things, the mayors don't get to decide. It's not Mayor Coderre's decision. And Mayor Coderre and I have had this conversation many times. Ultimately, it is a decision that needs to be based on good science and on a rigorous regulatory process where the rules don't change mid-game.
So with
and
that,
because we're talking Eastern Canada, we have a question in French for you, Mayor Nenshi. Pourquoi prendre la parole aujourd'hui pour dire nous avons besoin d'énergie et quels sont vos arguments de base?
Do you want to take that one first?
Pour parler spécifiquement, entre autres.
Ils viennent de Nouveau-Brunswick, la seule province bilingue du pays, et vous
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I understand your question, but it's been a long time for me, so I won't attempt to answer it in French, but I am working on it, so thank you very much. So look, why? I think the question today, why today? Why step out here as mayors? And this is nothing new for me and for us as a city. This is something we've invested significant resources and time over the last 3 years to actively work with TransCanada. It's been a great working relationship, and we have brought a very balanced approach to this this discussion in St. John, New Brunswick. Those 5 categories that I mentioned, and what we see before us, though, is we see an applicant that has suspended his application. We see a lot of news coverage that this is a dead process, and what I wanted to send in particular, and Mayor Nenshi can speak for himself, is a signal that we care deeply about this in New Brunswick. We have one of the largest oil refiners in the country in St. John. This is an important project for our economy, and that I absolutely believe this can be done in a balanced way. And I appreciate what Mayor Nenshi said, that the rail cars are coming, or the tankers, they're coming to St. John, New Brunswick anyway. So I think I've been raised to be a part of the solution. I couldn't sit back, and I wasn't comfortable sitting back and just letting this play out. So we wanted to send a strong signal today that we're supportive of the process moving forward again. And this is not that we have not done anything and that we just decided today. It's we have done a lot of work on this file, and we're going to continue to do a lot of work on this file.
Et à mon part, j'ai parlé pendant beaucoup de mois, beaucoup des années, de l'importance de l'infrastructure d'énergie pour la nation. Et maintenant, nous sommes dans une période de suspension de 30 jours sur le projet Énergie Est. Et c'est très important qu'on parle de l'importance de ce projet pour la sécurité d'énergie du Canada et aussi pour l'accès du marché pour les produits canadiens. Et moi, je suis heureux que le maire Darling est ici cette semaine parce qu'on peut parler par les impacts nationaux de ce projet.
So Mayor Nenshi, you mentioned before, mayors don't make this decision. So what good can come? Is this just to show a united front, to show Quebec that you mean business, to show the NEB that you mean business? I mean, what good comes out of mayors from each side coming together and saying we're behind it?
I think it's important for us to send a message to the federal government. We are, of course, the city that is the home base of the National Energy Board, and we're very proud of the smart, world-leading regulatory aspect and the science-based decision-making of the National Energy Board. And I think it's important for us to say to the federal government, don't let politics get in the way of a world-leading regulatory system. Yeah, improve it. do better Indigenous consultation, figure out better ways to involve the public in the conversations, but allow the NEB to do its job, and to do its job in a rigorous scientific way. And I think it's important for the federal government to hear from both sides of the country. Mayor Darling was saying both ends of the pipeline, but it actually doesn't come to Calgary, about this. And as the home base of the NEB, I think Calgarians really have a stake in making sure that that organization remains one to be proud of.
So
we're pretty short on time, so just last question.
One of the reporters, one of the local reporters were asking, what is to blame for this withdrawal? And you mentioned this is not a withdrawal, this is a suspension, but the question remains, why do you think this project is being suspended for 30 years now?
For 30 days, yeah.
For 30
Yeah,
days.
so look, so two things. First, I was thinking about it this morning when I woke up. In terms of the national scale of this project and the importance, I mean, I would argue, I was thinking about how important the Canadian Pacific Railway was in 1885 to this country. I would argue this is a moment in time where this is as important a project. Second part, to answer your question specifically, what I have learned in the first 15 or 16 months of my job is important for me not to speculate. So I give you that question back to TransCanada. I mean, I didn't withdraw or suspend, rather, the application they did. And, you know, they've put out limited answers to why. But I think, you know, that what my opinion is, personally, is that we need clarity. We need clarity for this project so it can move forward in terms of the regulatory process, but you should ask the question to them.
How do you get buy-in in eastern municipalities? I mean, something like
Sorry.
GHG.
We need some take this last one.
Thank you. GHG emissions downstream, for example, stringent regulations on that. Do you think that is, you know, what's going to be required to be able to get buy-in in these municipalities?
You know, this is really something that Minister McKenna and Minister Carr, I think, have really thought a lot about. And it's important for them to hear from these municipalities because, as you know, when we look at the path of Energy East, it has been supported in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba. The conditions, I understand, in Ontario have been met. It's certainly been supported in New Brunswick. There's just one province, and certainly a number of municipalities that have raised some concerns in that remaining province. Remember, too, that this is largely a reversal with some new construction from Montreal to St. John. As a result, I think we have to be super thoughtful about what it is we're building here. And I've said many times in relation to the Keystone XL pipeline that you can't let a 1 meter wide pipeline, a 3 foot wide pipe, carry all of the sins of the carbon economy. And in so doing, you're making a terrible mistake for the prosperity of Canada, but also for the environment.
Thanks very much, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.